Welcome, everyone. We're going to start now. Mark, if you could please share your slides. Thank you so much. So, welcome. My name is Leana Cash. I work at the International Science Council. I'm the lead coordinator and author for this project and report. Today, we're really happy to officially launch and present this work. Most of the people you are here from today, they've been involved in this work for over a year. So it's quite an important moment for us. We're also very pleased and maybe a little bit nervous to see how many of you are joining us today to celebrate this International Day of Women and Girls in Science. So thank you so much. And let me introduce right now Mark Cesar from our project task force. He will take you through the introduction today. Mark, just to introduce him quickly, he was president of the International Union of Pure and Applied Chemistry, also known as IUPAC, from 2014 to 2015. He's currently the chair of the IUPAC Standing Committee on Ethics, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. He is also the former treasurer of the Standing Committee for Gender Equality in Science, one of the project partner. And the floor is yours, Mark. Please go ahead.
Hey, thank you, Leah, and hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar on Women in Scientific Organizations, Evidence from Academies and Unions. Okay. Trying to advance the slides here. Excuse me for just a second. There we go. Thanks for joining us today. As you know, today is the 2026 International Day of Women and Girls in Science, so it is a perfect time for us to gather to review the findings of this collaborative project. Our webinar today is also a contribution to the 2026 Global Women's Breakfast, a program organized by the International Union of Pure and Applied Chemistry to encourage dialogue and progress on gender issues across the scientific community. This webinar marks the completion of our global study on gender equality in scientific organizations and the launch of our global report towards gender equality in scientific organizations, assessment and recommendations. Representatives of the three partner institutions have collaborated to prepare the report whose results we will hear about today. The International Science Council, ISC, is a nonprofit organization with a membership of 250 national and young academies and international scientific unions. It works at the global level to convene scientific expertise on issues of major concern to both science and society. The InterAcademy Partnership, IAP, is a global network of 153 science, engineering, and medical academies and 4 regional networks working together to provide independent expert advice on scientific, technological, and health issues. The Standing Committee for Gender Equality in Science, SCGES, is a partnership of 25 scientific, discipline-based international professional unions who have come together to promote gender equality globally and across disciplines. This webinar presents results from the 2025 Global Study on Gender Equality across academies, unions, and disciplinary societies, and it is the first edition to include qualitative components. Drawing on data from 136 organizations, nearly 600 scientists, along with targeted interviews, the report examines women's participation, leadership, and recognition, as well as the barriers that persist within scientific organizations. The discussion will highlight key findings, share examples of effective institutional practices, and outline structural changes needed to make scientific organizations more equitable and representative, with the aim of informing and encouraging concrete action by scientific leaders, policymakers, and researchers. The study builds on 2 previous global surveys. The first one in 2015 was conducted by the Academy of Science of South Africa and the IAP. The second in 2020 was conducted by the IAP Gender Insight and the ISC. Additionally, the report is informed by the results of the 2019 SCGES Gender Gap in Science project, which included a global survey of scientists, an analysis of gender-related patterns in scientific publications, and a database of good practices. The study highlights new perspectives on the issue of gender in science, offering new comparative data, detailing institutional level analyses of policies and practices, and providing evidence that can form the basis of initiatives targeting concrete change. Importantly, the focus of the study is not only on how frequently women are represented in these organizations, but also on the processes these organizations use for nominations to positions in governance and leadership, for selection of award winners, and for other forms of recognition. This approach sheds light on the structural mechanisms that shape access, leadership, and inclusion within scientific organizations. A critical role can be played by scientific organizations in achieving the goals of gender equality, both within the sciences and in the broader society. The processes and decisions that academies and scientific unions employ shape who is recognized as a scientific authority, who accesses leadership and decision making, and who represents science nationally and internationally. The persons who are members of these institutions and who lead them have direct influence over how science is governed, recognized, and connected to society. We are reminded that women are underrepresented in these institutions compared to their overall numbers in the scientific workforce. Therefore, a key aspect of the current project is to identify best practices across these institutions in order to provide information on initiatives that can promote gender equality in the sciences. We will now hear about the key findings from the report. First, Leah Nakash will present the results from the science academies.
Thank you so much, Mark. So let me share my screen so you can follow with me because you will be drowned in data, I fear. So I'll present what we have learned during this project, working on the surveys. And first, we'll start with what we've learned from the institutional survey. I'll focus on the Science Academy side, and then I'll hand over to Marie-Françoise Roy, who will present for the union side. So I'll just bring up the most important finding now, and I hope you can see my screen. And then for the details, we invite you to explore the report that has been launched today. So if I move, so overall, we see that women's membership in Science Academy has increased globally, but it remains quite low with strong disciplinary disparities. In 2025, women now average 19% of Academy members. It's up from 12% in 2015 and 16% in 2020. A key positive trend that we've discovered is that the proportion of academies with extremely low representation, meaning less than 10% women, dropped by half. It used to be 19% in 2025, 34%, sorry, in 2015, and it's now down to 19% in 2025. So this was one of the key positive trends that we identified. But as you can see from the chart on your screen, you see that the progress is highly discipline dependent, and it obviously mimics the discrepancy we observe in education and academia. We see that the representation from women in the social science, in the humanity, in the arts, and in several applied fields show the strongest gains over the past decades, and that mathematics, physics, chemistry, computer science, and other related fields continue to lag behind. So you can find all the details of this data in the chart in the report. Now, if we look at the geographical distribution, in 2025, the best performing academy, ranging from 30 to 39% of women members, are geographically diverse. They're scattered across Latin America, Asia, and Africa. And this tells us that progress is really achievable in diverse contexts, and that what matters more is institutional practices by the organization. When we look at women in position of leadership, progress is more limited. Women currently hold 20% of National Academy presidency. It's 10 out of 50. And 6 of those 10 are located in Europe. It's up only marginally since the last decade. So it went from 17 to 20% women presidents. So not a lot of progress. And sadly, we have to report that half of the academies still report no women among vice president or co-chair, which highlight a persistent leadership gap. And something I want to highlight before moving on is that this gap, they cannot be explained by pipeline effects alone. Institutional process really matter. Scientific organization, they have formally open merit-based procedure, of course, and the issue is obviously not explicit exclusion, but rather we looked at nomination practice, selection norms, and informal network shape who is identified and encouraged to join those organizations. And as a result, women, they remain underrepresented in nomination pools compared to their share amongst eligible scientists. Now, if we look at the institutional processes behind those numbers, looking at nomination and elections process, in the academy that collect and provide complete nomination data, and so might be the better performer because unfortunately the sample was quite low in the study for this data. Only 27 academy were able to share the full details of their nomination and election for the years 2022-2024. And we see that in this limited sample that women represent 30% of nomination pools, a figure that has remained stable over the last 5 years. Again, bearing in mind this might be the best performers. But what's interesting is that we identified that once nominated, women are elected at slightly higher rate. You can see there 36% are elected on average, and that election success has improved in the last 5 years. So women have a better chance of becoming elected in academy. To us, this suggests that the primary bottleneck occurs earlier in the process and that the composition of nomination pools remain the key barrier. So we were interested to study the election models by academy, and indeed they do appear to matter. Most academy, 19%, they rely on nominations by existing members, meaning that existing members are charged with the responsibility of nominating new members. And we see that academies that rely on committee-based elections, so have a dedicated structure to handle those nominations, report substantially higher average representation of women, around 34% women compared to 17% in academy that use member nomination and plenary vote alone. So to us, this suggests that more structured and deliberative processes may mitigate some of the bias present in broader voting systems. Now let's look at what academy are actually doing to promote women within their ranks. When we examine the institutional response, we see a clear gradient in the level of commitment. Gender equality policies and practices are increasingly present, but they remain weakly institutionalized. That's one of our main findings from the report. So you see that most academy have symbolic or declarative measures, such as policy statements in favor of gender equality. 62% have those. 52% have programmatic initiative, but we have to say that these efforts, they are most often limited to awareness raising or encouragement. They are rarely backed by dedicated structure or dedicated funding. And when we look at structural and government mechanism, it's even fewer. And we have to say that only a small minority report dedicated funding. You see 9% aimed at funding initiative for gender equality. So we've concluded that gender equality efforts remain marginal to core governance's process and that they rely heavily on the commitment of individual actors to drive this gender equality, and it's not really sustained by institutional engagement. And now I'm handing the floor to Marie-Françoise Roy, member of the Standing Committee for Gender Equality in Science and president of the Committee for Women in Mathematics of the International Mathematical Union, to present to you the main findings from international unions. Please go ahead, Marie-Françoise.
Thank you. Thank you, Leah. So, of course, the structure of international unions is quite distinct from the structure of the academies, and we are going to see also that the commitment is somewhat different. So we have been surveying the results of 38 international unions that we were able to analyze because some answers were a little partial. I can add that there were also some other organizations, not academies and not unions, who are part of ISC, but they were so diverse that we are not really able to analyze the answers. So it means that about half of the academies, of the union that would be possible to answer have been really answering the survey. Among them, we have 19 SCGS partner unions on a total of 25 partner unions of SCGS. So we have quite a good proportion of our partners which are answering. And it's also building on the 2020 ISC IAP survey. And we had also the book that Mark mentioned, and also SCGS surveys in 2023 and 2024. Unfortunately, the longitudinal comparisons were limited to the 15 unions which were participating in the 2020 and 25, which were participating in the 2020 survey as well as in the 2025 survey. And 13 of them were from SCGS. So the reason why we focus also on the differences between the answers of the SCGS compared to the other unions is because SCGS unions are working together with their annual reporting, participation in webinars, exchange of best practices, and engagement in twice-yearly meetings. And we hope it makes a difference. So we wanted to know if it's or not making a difference. And you'll see the results. Next, Leah, please. Yeah. Okay. So we were interested in understanding the patterns of women's representation in scientific communities, because as you can read in the report, there are no global data on women scientists. The estimation is that the proportion of women scientists is about 1/3, but it's really, there are many data which are lacking. And in fact, 16 unions provided estimates of the number of women in their scientific community. Most of them from SDGs partner unions. And there is a variety of methodology and data sources, estimates by their national members or analysis of publication patterns. So what we can say from this analysis is that several scientific communities have what we call gender balanced proportion of women, which means that women represent from 40 to 60% of the community. So this starts with anthropology, but also other kind of topics, not only say social sciences topics, such as biochemistry and molecular biology, geosciences, and so on. Then there are intermediate levels, which are in fact underrepresentation of women, typically in history and philosophy of science and technology, soil sciences, crystallography, and also mathematics. And finally, lower levels in STEM fields, including computer science, physics, and speleology. So we think it would be really important to know more about the proportion of women in the various scientific communities, because in order to evaluate how scientific organizations are good at having representation of women must also be based on the number of women scientists in these fields. Next, please. Okay. Okay, so something important to know is that the international unions in general, very few international unions have members, individual members, in the sense that their members are often countries of regions. So it's very difficult to know what is the participation of women inside the union itself, because it will be more inside the members of the union, which are countries. But what we can look at is the gender representation in the union leadership, and we see that it is comparatively strong, especially if we compare with what we got from the academies, because on average, women hold 40% of leadership position over the 38 international unions one-third. And over half of them, unions report gender balance in their leadership. Gender balance is with the same definition from 40% to 60%. And across the 15 unions participating in both surveys, the share of women has really been growing from 31.8% to 45.5%. So it really means some effort of the international unions, at least those who answered the survey, of course, to reach gender equality or better, let's say, at least gender balance in their leadership. Now we looked also at what happens in the General Assemblies. So many of the unions report having a General Assemblies, but very few of them, in fact, only 9 of them provided some gender disaggregated data on the participation to the General Assembly. So we don't have enough data there. So in fact, in terms of scientific congresses, again, many of the unions organized scientific congresses, and they recorded most of the time the proportion of invited speakers, but less recorded the proportion of women in the attendees or in the organizers. But basically, women's participation is similar across roles from 36 to 38%, and this is online with the total proportion of women scientists, which is about 1/3. So this is not too bad. But now if we came to awards and prizes, we see that it's less good, because there are many unions who report less than 30% for the nominees and awardees. And we have also what was noticed already for the academy, that the number of nominees is small and the number of awardees is slightly better. It's also interesting to report, so sorry, can you go back? Yes. So 7 unions, all from SCGS, reported having women-only awards, which is maybe a way to promote women, even though the normal, the normal mechanism for awards is not really working. So they needed to promote especially women in some cases. Okay, next. Okay, so now what do unions do in terms of policy structures and resources for gender equality? So again, gender equality is mentioned in the governing documents of 64% of the unions, even more for SCGS partner unions. Nearly half of the unions reported having a permanent structure focused on gender, and a large majority of SCGS partner unions reported having such structures, and while the other unions reported much less of these structures. So again, it's a big difference with the academies, where there are very few academies with gender-specific structures. And also, among those with dedicated structures, most unions reported having sufficient resources to support their gender-related work. Okay, so, but of course, everything is not perfect, and many things need to be improved. So, for example, it would be good to have more dedicated budget for gender equality, because they still remain in a minority of unions. The formal grievance mechanisms for gender-related complaints are most of the time not really made in a systematic way. And moreover, it's very complicated to have systematic evaluation of the policies for gender equality. Only 30% 14% of the unions report assessing the effectiveness of such initiatives. So the unions also have some web pages dedicated to gender equality or women in science, and most of them also from SCGS and partner unions. Next. Okay. So we also considered initiatives and challenges to promote gender equality. Many of the unions, more than 2/3, reported gender initiatives, and most of them were collaboration with other organizations, especially, of course, for those who are members of SCGS, and also celebration of special days like the International Day of Women and Girls in Science, which is already today on 11th of February. Also awareness-raising campaigns and engagement in research for gender equality and women in science for 1/3 of the unions, depending, of course, on their discipline, on their thematical scientific discipline. We notice that there is less emphasis on direct support for individual development or mentoring. So in terms of challenges, the unions identified the lack of gender disaggregated data as really one of the main challenges, especially already inside the scientific community. On the geographic base, also, maybe people have global proportion of women in science in their discipline, but they don't know it, the continent by continent or even less country by country. And also, they don't record themselves, like, for example, the proportion of women attending the General Assembly. So people are really insisting on this importance of having gender disaggregated data in order to know what to do. And also, there was also complaints about challenges about limited institutional support. So few constraints related to funding, not enough people working on the topic. And so that was identified as also a major challenge by half of the unions. Okay, so that's what we can say about the answer of the unions. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie-Françoise. So Marie-Françoise and I, we've presented to you what it looks like from the institutional perspective, meaning what the organizations surveyed have responded. But we thought it would also be interesting to deepen the analysis to survey scientists directly. And so we had a third survey that was open to scientists all around the world, tongue twister for French people, that were involved in scientific organization. And so I'll just take you quickly to what we've learned from them. So insights from the scientists, they highlight the importance of formal mechanism because despite scientific organization having open processes, their access is actually strongly shaped by encouragement and support from mentors. You can see from the screen, the data on the screen, that encouragement matters strongly for both men and women, but it matters more for women. They're more likely to describe encouragement as essential. And at the same time, this support to feel confident enough to seek nominations or to join an union, this report is really male dominated, which in our opinion reflects existing powers and network structures. So while access is formally open, we can say that it is informally gatekept through who is encouraged, who is made visible, and who is seen as a legitimate candidates. In regards to participation, the gender difference become even more apparent. So women who join scientific organizations, academies, and unions, they participate at the same level than men in terms of hours or the task that they're trusted with, but it does not lead to comparable progression or recognitions in the structures. And you'll see we've been able to conclude from the responses we received from scientists that women are 3 times more likely than men to report barriers to opportunity and progression. Experiences as events also differ significantly. So General Assembly and scientific congresses, because women are 4 times more likely to miss an event due to care responsibility. And when they manage to attend, they report gender-based difference. You see on the screen, they are 6 times more likely to report experiencing gender-based difference in treatment and opportunity offered to them during those events. And sadly, incidents of harassment and discrimination persists. Women are 2 times more likely to report exposure to incidents, and they're also more likely to declare having a lower trust in reporting mechanism. And this is particularly important if you remember one of the data that we gave you is that only 24% of scientific organizations have mechanism to deal with those incidents. So for us, taken together, this finding, they point to structural and cultural barrier that shape participation way beyond initial access. And it means that it's not only a pipeline issue, and that institutional design and practices, they play an important role in shaping outcome and in shaping the representation, participation, leadership of women in scientific organization. So this is it for the main findings. It was a lot, we know, but the report is out. You can re-engage with all those findings and results and all the charts and the data at your own pace. So we really invite you to have a look. And we will now hear from representatives of scientific organizations, who have informed case studies that are part of the report and who have introduced policies and practices to address this gap. And so to moderate the panel and give you a little break from this French accent that you've been hearing from the past 20 minutes, I'm pleased to give the floor to Peter McGrath, who is the coordinator of the InterAcademy Partnership, which is one of the project partner. Please take it away, Peter.
Okay, thank you very much, Leah, Marie-Françoise, and Mark, of course, for bringing us this far. It's my job now to introduce some of the case studies that Leah just alluded to. We have 3 speakers, Rebecca Santamaria from the Spanish Royal Academy of Sciences, followed by Lilia Meza Montes from UPAC, the International Union of Pure and Applied Physics, and Ranuka Bade from the Scientific Committee on Antarctic Research. And if you're busy downloading and scrolling through the report as we're speaking, you'll find their case studies presented in that report. We as IAP, just to add a couple of words, have been involved in these surveys and reports since 2015. The very first one, we did it with ISC in 2020, and we're happy to expand the partnership with the SCGES for this 3rd edition, which really lays out the progress that we're seeing. Slow but steady, I think, can be said, but let's hear on how different organizations are actually implementing and pushing for the reform that we're urging. Please, Rebecca, feel free to go ahead and share your screen if you have slides.
So thank you very much, Peter, and thank you very much, Leah, for inviting me to explain about the Spanish Royal Academy of Science and how we have dealt with this theme. So our academy was founded in 1847 by Isabel II. I only wanted to see you how it looks, so our building and the queen. Okay. So, to the theme. So, before 2020, the Academy has 10% female fellows, full and corresponding members. In 2020, the Academy approved the new statutes. So, in 2025, we have 27% of female fellows. How was the way to that? So the way was that in 2018 we have elections and we have a new board. So the new board decided that the academy needed new statutes. So they make a 3-person working group. So you can see the members of this working group to make the new statutes, and it takes about 2 years. So the new group, the working group, drafted the statutes, looking always for consensus, looking always that every people are agree with the new statutes. The new statutes addressed 3 key issues. The issues are the aging of the members. We have very old members, very old fellows. The another problem was the underrepresentation of women. We have less than almost 0 women. And the 3 issue was to create clear rules and responsibilities, so clear duties for the members. So after 2 years conversation, so looking for consensus, in 2020, the new statutes were approved. In these new statutes, we have 40% gender quota. That means at least 40% of the new elected fellows must be women. We have also a general renewal rule. That means 50% of the new correspondent members must be under 50 years old. How make it works? So the number of senior or full members positions was increased from 54 to 72 to create a space to accelerate the progress without waiting for natural turnover. And the same in the correspondence. The corresponding member position were increased from 90 to 144 to create a space to accelerate the progress without waiting for the natural turnover. So that means that in 2020, we had 133 members, of whom 120 were men and 12 were women. So you can see it here. And in December last year, so the last number that we have right now 181 academians, of whom 136 are men and 40% are women. That means almost 25%. Here you have a draw with every woman that we have, unless a lot of them. So after the new statutes, so the new statutes facilitate the election of the Academy first ever woman president, Ana Crespo, in 2024, after 177 years of history. Because if more women have the right to vote, it makes easier to elect a woman. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Rebecca, and also for keeping on time. It's great, thank you. So an interesting, positive case study that we've started off with. There's my timer going. Let us move on quickly to Lilia Meza Montes. Lilia is a solid-state physicist living and working in Mexico. She was the first woman actually to receive a doctoral degree from her university, the Benemérita Universidad Autónoma de Puebla. And as I mentioned before, she is here representing UPAP, the International Union of Pure and Applied Physics. So please, Lilia, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much for the invitation to share our experience in the AYUPA working group number 5, Women in Physics. I hope you are watching my presentation, right? Okay, so let's go. So a few words about the International Union of Pure and Applied Physics. It was established in 1922 with 13 member countries, and the first General Assembly was held in 1923. Currently, we have 52 territorial members, which is basically our national scientific organizations, most of them not specifically on physics. And we have also 8 associate corporate members, several associate territorial members, which are also national organizations with a different status, and personal members which have to fulfill some requirements. The map shows here the coverage of our union, and you see that still we have several regions where no country members. Now, within the structure of the union, there are working groups. These are created for a limited time to address specific issues or problems. Within this framework, in the 23rd General Assembly in 1999, the resolution number 6 established the formation of the working group Women in Physics. And the mandate for the group was survey the present situation and report to the Council and the liaison committees, and suggest means to improve the situation for women in physics. As is was shown before, and it is well known, we have women in physics are a minority in this community. Now, to address this mandate, a conference, an international conference was organized, which is called EQUIP. And this here you see the group photo of the conference, the first one in Paris in 2002. And basically the structure remains the same. We have plenary talks and panels, small groups discussion that have become workshops in reality. And now also a session of country posters where the team leaders present data on the women in their countries and also about the activities they perform. Also, we have regional meetings to increase networking and also the exchange of local experiences. Cultural and social activities also, and you can follow the websites of each conference. We have already organized 7, and this image shows the snapshot of the participants, some participants in the last one virtually held in India. In this conference, we see the participants, which are, as you can see, for example, in Africa, we have teams even in countries that are not members of the union. Important outcomes of these conferences are the proceedings, which have been published in the American Institute Conference Proceeding Series. And these are very important because they show the development of the conference through the years and also the performance of all the countries and how they have evolved. The last conference proceedings are about to be published. Also, we have organized surveys, the first ones in 2001, and since then in 2006 and 2010, where the survey was translated to 8 languages. And of course, as it was mentioned, we also were part of the Project Gender Gap, and in the survey we are addressing in this webinar. We recently celebrated our 25th anniversary, and a forum was organized jointly with the Chinese Physical Society during the General Assembly in China in 2024. In this forum, we heard about the beginnings of the working group. We pay tribute to the members of the first working group because definitely they paved the way to achieve all the goals we have seen through the years. We also heard about women in China and the impact about this initiative across the regions, and talk a little bit about the future. We can see, you see here the audience and also some of the speakers, which were chairs of the conference, particularly Silvina Dawson, who is currently is the president of the union. Just to finish, just to say a worldwide impact, it is very important that it made an issue, a gender an issue to be discussed openly. Now we have the teams very active, and more within the UPAP, more participation and better conditions for women. We have programs and materials to attack the interests of girls in physics, and grants to support young women to attend scientific events. Very important is the adoption of principles for gender inclusion and diversity in physics, which were proposed by the working group through the resolutions of the International Conference Women in Physics. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lilia, again, also for staying on time for this interesting presentation on the progress that has been made for women in physics within the UPAP network. Again, it shows a slow and steady work in this area can really lead to positive change. Let's move on to our third speaker in this session. We have Ranuca Bade. She currently serves as Secretary General of the European component of the Global Ocean Observing System, EuroGOOS, a post she took up just in January this year. She's previously held leadership positions at the European Polar Board and the Scientific Committee on Antarctic Research, SCAR or SCAR, and it is in that position that she's presenting to us the case study from the Scientific Committee on Antarctic Research. Please, Ranuca, over to you.
Thank you very much, Peter. I just wanted to acknowledge the fact that while I'm presenting the results of some of the work that we have done with the SCAR EDI Action Group, I wanted to acknowledge not just the leadership of the SCAR EDI Action Group, but also the entire group whose efforts have led us here today to the success that it has been for SCARs over the last few years. So I wanted to introduce what SCAR is. SCAR was an organization that was founded in 1958, particularly for promotion and coordination of international scientific research in Antarctica. It's a thematic organization under the ISC, and that encourages data sharing and long-term research planning amongst the different member nations. SCAR serves as the primary advisory body to the Antarctic Treaty System and other relevant stakeholders. A slight difference to note is that SCAR's work is geographically bound to Antarctica rather than topically bound, as most other unions are. A little bit of an overview, we have member countries that span the globe, and these include both very established Antarctic nations, but also newcomers to the field. This is not something I'm expecting everyone to understand or look at. It's just the complicated nature of the SCAR organogram, but I think that gives us a little bit of a flavor of how many different topics and scientific specialties SCAR deals with. I just wanted to point out the fact that the Equity, Diversity and Inclusion group has pride of place in that organogram, and it reports directly to the executive committee and the delegates of SCAR. That gives it the year of the leadership at SCAR. So just to summarize, SCAR works with a diversity of geographies, of cultures, and of disciplines. How did we start looking at this? Women in many countries have been barred from polar research until quite recently. Until the 1990s, there were quite a few countries that did not allow women to do overwintering at Antarctic research stations. There may be informal barriers that still persist for not just women, but also for the other groups as well. We started off in the 1960s, late 1960s. This was a group of women that first reached the South Pole. And this group of women has broken the ceiling for many, many such amazing women to follow. SCAR picked up the baton to look at gender diversity issues, and it has held many different workshops and events at SCAR conferences and meetings. One thing of note I would like to point out is the Wikibomb, Women in Antarctic Research Wikibomb, that was carried out by SCAR in 2016. And that resulted in, for most people know that there are far less women than men on Wikipedia. However, for Antarctic research, the opposite holds true. And this Women in Antarctic Research Wikibomb was the factor that resulted in that reverse skew. There are still more women than men Antarctic researchers on Wikipedia today. So what are the special challenges that SCAR has to look out for? The Antarctic research environment is extreme. It's cold, unpredictable, and that makes work very, very difficult. There's accessibility barriers because stations, transport, and research equipment that was built many decades ago are not designed for mobility or impairments that researchers may face. There's medical and support needs. Special medications or devices must be carried. And the few team members that are there may lack the experience to support people needing special care. There's also physical and logistical demands, moving across ice, carrying heavy gear, and also long expeditions require high stamina and adaptation. So SCAR broadened, looking at all of these issues, SCAR broadened its perspective from looking just at gender diversity to actually address all the issues under equality, diversity, and inclusion umbrella. There was a scoping group that was formed in 2020, and that was formally established as an action group in 2022. This promotes EDI principles within SCAR and also the wider scientific community. How has SCAR succeeded in its work? The group works in close cooperation with the Secretariat and reports directly to the leadership. It has flexibility, high visibility, and has impactful engagement. The most important thing I wanted to point out is SCAR has set aside funding for one paid staff member that helps coordinate the activities and sustain initiatives of this group. There's, of course, implementation challenges, but the lessons learned are to prioritize gender sensitivity, to cooperate with many other EDI groups that exist within the Antarctic space, and provide training on EDI as needed. We have to be careful about considering the concept of Western thinking, and it should not preclude all of the work that we do, and also consider that language may be a barrier for many different people. Some of the good practices that can be shared with other organizations is to promote inclusion, have an open dialogue, and basically provide toolkits and materials to support EDI awareness and implementation. Some of the recommendations for meetings and conferences that the SCAR EDI Action Group gives include integrating EDI principles throughout the conference, preparation of detailed documentation and implementation of a code of conduct, to have hybrid access and also resources for non-Anglophone attendees, and provide help and support for groups that need it. And finally, the key takeaways from SCAR: research fellowships can be designed to support early career development. They don't need to be only for senior researchers. Have a look at the eligibility criteria and the assessment frameworks. And these can be adapted to account for nonlinear career paths that generally affect a lot of women more than men. We have to identify structural constraints that are specific to the research context. In this case, SCAR has looked at the Antarctic context. And finally, inclusivity should be an embedded organizational practice and not looked at in independent views. Thank you so much. Back to you, Peter.
Yes. Thank you, Renuka. And again, successful case study, how steady progress can be made, even in the most demanding and challenging of research conditions. So thank you for sharing that. We have, in theory, just 2 minutes left on this particular section of the webinar. I wonder if I can call on our 3 speakers. Just maybe the same question and one line answers from each of you. What next? Where can you go next with what you've achieved so far? I wonder, Rebecca, and then a chance for Lilia and Renuka to consider their thoughts while Rebecca is answering. Yeah. Are you there, Rebecca? Maybe we can jump straight to Lilia. Sorry to put you in the spotlight. Where do you go
No, it's
next with
okay.
UPAP?
Okay, thank you. I think this is a very, very clever question about what's next. One of the things is how the working group was created to address the situation of women. So now we need to extend this to a more wide context, diversity, not only about gender, and also about ethnicity, and also another topics. This is one of the next step. This is the next step, but also in my opinion, what we need is to really achieve that all the individual members embrace all this feeling, this orientation, because sometimes I've heard that some colleagues are not very happy with all this statement. So we have really to convince the whole community to embrace all these statements and follow the recommendations. So to me, this is what is next for the union.
Okay, thank you for that. Rebecca, I see you're back on the screen with us. You have what's next for the Royal Spanish Academy.
Is to find out women. I mean, so the problem that the all fellows had is that they didn't any other women in the file. So they have to choose more women, but they always say they are not women in physics, for example. And you always have to speak with them and to say, no, they are women, you only have to look for them. And we put them in touch with associations from women in technologies or another fields. So that is the problem, that the all fellows, they say there are not enough women for the quota. But it's only, I mean, it's a way. You have to make the way. This is the problem we have now, but I think we're trying to make it. I mean, it's possible, but the all fellows need a little more attention for that.
Okay, thank you. And certainly, as Leah pointed out in her opening presentation, the discipline-based differences are still there in a number of disciplines. You mentioned physics, I think mathematics, IT, and so on. So there is still some work to do, and I see some questions in the chat on that respect as well. Renuka for SCAR, what's happening next?
Yeah, sure. I think Lilia got to the crux of what I would also say. We have started working on these issues in SCAR, but there's such a long way to go to make Antarctic science truly inclusive. So while we have just started, I think now we have to build in the energy and the sustainability with funding and with support, with leadership support, to ensure that all of the different discipline groups, all the different geographical groups, everyone embraces these and makes all of these EDI recommendations their own and takes it up from there. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that. And unfortunately, I'm sure we could go deeper into these questions, these case studies, but we have to move on, I'm afraid. Let me quickly introduce Catherine Jami. With particular relevance here, she has been the Secretary General of the Division of History of Science and Technology of the International Union of History and Philosophy of Science and Technology, with a very complicated acronym. Since 2024, she is a member of the governing board of the International Science Council. Catherine, over to you.
Thank you. I think Leah will share the slides that will accompany what I want to say. So yes, and in between the two statutes that you mentioned, I also have been the founding chair of the Committee for Gender Equality in Science. So what I'm going to describe to you now, I think you will be easy to relate to what Leah and Marie-Françoise have said, and you will also recognize some of what three colleagues, Rebecca, Renuka, and Lilia, have described that organizations do. Can I have the next slide, please? So the recommendations are evidence-based, so relying on what problems, what situations there are, and also what we have seen that works. So first of all, when you read these recommendations, the idea is that it's for each organization to read them critically and select what they think they can do best, and what also is most urgent for them, and the variety of measures that can be taken also can apply to different structures. We have heard that, of course, academies and unions are quite different institutions. So there are, I would say, 5 headings under which we can see a way forward. The first one is institutionalizing gender equality. So I think it's meaning it's not just a small group or an individual. It's going to be about the organization as an institution. So embedding a commitment to gender equality in statutes, I think, is, we would say, an important first step. Then adopting a plan with clear objectives would follow from that. And we can, you continue then to say who is in charge, so having dedicated structures, and as we have found, reporting regularly to see how things, the progress that one is making. I think that putting these 3 reports as has been presented in the findings makes a huge difference to what one is able to say. So you can only measure your progress if you report regularly. And last but not least, funding is also needed. So that's the idea that, institutionalize, and it's not a matter of a person who thinks it's important because that person's term will finish and then work needs to continue. Next one, please. Second point is the processes, and I think that has been also, light has been shed on this in the presentation of the findings. the processes for nomination, election, and recognition. It's really important that they should be transparent, fair, and accountable. So upstream, publish the rules, and then ensure that the pools of nominees are balanced. Also, nomination and election committees, who they are and how they are trained is extremely important, because gender unconscious bias is not a matter of bad faith. It's a matter of the culture in which we all live that has shaped us. And finally, it's important to document and monitor decision at each stage to detect bias. And I have seen cases in which just the monitoring is, has striking effects as to, reaching parity. Next slide, please. So an important point that all of us have to work on is, and the organizations, I think, are the right institutions to do that, is to provide safe and respectful environments by preventing, addressing misconduct. So the first thing is to adopt a code of conduct, and that, I have to say, is one field in which I have seen that dialogue amongst organizations can be very useful for all these recommendations that I'm talking about. You can look around you to other organizations to see how they have done it, some things, and get inspiration from them. The training of leaders and committee members and stuff is also important. For reporting misconduct, one needs to have confidential and independent reporting mechanisms. Again, these have already been implemented in some of organizations. And the procedures should also be visible, accessible, and protective of those who report. So this is really part of how to change our organizational culture, I think, and it's a very, I would say, basic requirement to reach gender equality. But as you can see, it will have broader beneficial effects. Next slide, please. So the next important thing is to make participation in events accessible by, I would say, in two ways. One way is to set expectations for gender balance among speakers and chairs also. Caregivers should also be supported through financial and on-site solutions. And the use of hybrid or remote formats paired with inclusive scheduling where possible is also important. Where possible, because an international event, of course, will fall on different times in the clocks of different parts of the world. But this is, I think, important that one should not, have to be on the spot to be known, recognized, and to participate. Next, please. And finally, how do we develop an inclusive culture, and how do we open leadership pathways within our organization? So one important point is, I think, to include early and mid-career scientists in committees. That is something we have often come across, because all the organizations we have that, our ISC members have taken part in the survey tend to be run by people at a later stage of their career, and we just need input from younger people in order to be relevant and to hear their voices directly, but rather than just prescribe what is good for them. Mentorship and leadership development will also should also be addressed towards these younger generations. Another way of going forward is to ensure women's visibility where award leadership and public roles are concerned. Networks of women scientists certainly play an important role, and they need to be supported. And finally, I think integrating gender equality in mainstream meetings and events also plays a role. So what we are seeing here is that in every aspect of organizational culture, gender equality should be an issue addressed. Next, please. And how do we achieve all these goals? Well, we must know where we are and know where we're going. Therefore, the importance of collecting gender disaggregated data, because it's the only way to drive change in a way that is that can be objectively ascertained. So the data, of course, has to be collected regularly, and we have to spot key indicators, as I think is done to a large extent in this report, but it should be again done at the level of each organization. One should also look separately, of course, at disciplines, region, and career stage, and that is for international organizations as well as for academies. Yes, and so I should emphasize that one is in a vicious circle without data. No data, we don't know where we are. We don't know what measures are needed in particular, and we don't know how things change if they do. Next one, please. Finally, I think that sharing experience and good practice is extremely important. So as I've said earlier, look around, learn from others, and also lead by example if you're in a position to do so. Exchange among us scientific organization, I think is really a very interesting way forward, because one is usually, finds that what applies in a discipline might apply slightly differently in another one, and what is done at a national level but in an academy can also be relevant in international organizations that have national members and so on. So this sharing of experiences, I think, is implement good practice once they have been shown to be good and effective good practices in other organizations is also important. I would just want to finish by saying I think that unions are already doing that through the Standing Committee for Gender Equality in Science, and we hope that academies will also come to some similar device for exchanging experiences and working together. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you for taking us through the recommendation. Again, this is just a sneak peek. You'll find them in full in the report. And now, to conclude our webinar, we'll open the Q&A session. And for that session, I'm welcoming Nikki Hayes, who is a well-known author and academic with over 50 years of experience in psychology. She is a fellow of the Academy of Social Sciences and the British Psychological Society, a member of the Executive Council of the International Union of Psychological Sciences, IUPSIS. Please go ahead, Nikki. We've been collecting your questions from the Q&A chat as we went, and now we're going to go through them.
Thank you.
For about 20-25 minutes, let's say. We can be 5 minutes a bit over time. I think it's okay.
Okay. I'll just set my timer. Thank you, everyone, for attending. It's been interesting to read your questions in the chat. And one of the first questions that was asked were the two of them about what exactly an academy is and what exactly a union is, and we've talked about them as if people know. Maybe they've been answered by the respondents, but I wonder, Peter, do you think you could give a summary of a clear summary of what's involved in the academy category, and maybe Marie-Françoise, you could answer for the unions.
I'm happy to do that. I did provide something in the Q&A to the individual, but essentially academies are set up as merit-based organizations. They are a way to gather together the best scientists in the country, those that have published at the highest level, and they are therefore credible. They have great scientific knowledge. They are typically independent of government, so they can give independent advice on scientific issues. But even if many of them are supported by government financially, they operate sort of as independent spokespersons for science, in science advice, science outreach to the public, and so on. Many of them are historic also, some several hundred years old, and this is part of the reason, I think, why we have a large gender skew in academies. Maybe we can put more on in the chat with links to the website and so on. I'll stop there.
Thank you. Marie-Françoise, would you like to clarify what we mean by a union?
Yes, thank you. Sorry. So international unions are in general related to one specific scientific topic. So, for example, I mean, the one I know the best is the International Mathematical Union, but we've seen also the International Union for Pure and Applied Physics, or the International Union for Pure and Applied Chemistry, which is organizing the Global Women Breakfast we are party of today. And so these are more recent organizations, I would say, compared to academies, sometimes 100 years old or more, but not several hundreds of years. And basically, there are international efforts to organize a given thematical discipline in order to promote, for example, international congresses, and also to help the community of given discipline to get organized all over the world. So that's the reason why, in general, their members are not individual members, but more countries. And they are trying to promote their disciplines all over the world. So their aim is not to identify the best scientists, but is more to have a lively international community related to their scientific topics. So I don't know so well the ones in in social sciences. So maybe I don't know if they work the same. Maybe Nikki, you can say something about, for example, psychology. But I believe it's more or less similar.
I think they're very similar. My organization, the International Union of Psychological Sciences, basically brings together psychological associations from all over the world and looks at, aspects in common, bits of practice. It shares. It's a forum for psychologists all over the world to get together. And of course, it organizes the International Congress of Psychology, which is very important. But they don't have individual members as such. They have national or members or affiliated organizations. So, okay. The next question, thank you, by the way, for that. The next question is, I'm going to open to the panel. The question is, how does culture play a role in the participation of women in science? And is it something we should be looking into? So if any members of the panel would like to speak, maybe you can raise your hands or shout or something. Anybody?
Yeah, yes. Culture plays a very important role. We have noticed in the UPAP that, for example, in some countries, they have many initiatives supported by the government, by the organization, but we don't see progress. So finally, we have concluded that is culture and that is plays a very important role. So in some, it is, I think it's natural that the community reflects the society, and in the society there is inequalities. This is also reflected in the culture. So we have to pay a lot of attention on it. And also, I think it's important to point it out. This is part of our culture that we have to change. And also, I think that it is very important to work with young people because they are more open to change the culture. Thank you.
Thank you. Catherine?
Yes, very briefly, I would say that, yeah, I completely concur with what Lilia has just said. Gender equality is not just an issue in science, but in absolutely all societies around the world. And it is just because scientists are working inside the societies in which they live that we have this problem. I do not think science as an activity is a cause. It's just apparent in our profession as it is apparent elsewhere. And what is, I think, particularly encouraging is that, well, the webinar we're holding today, the report, and a number of, measures and activities that have been described earlier show that scientists as a profession are collectively, addressing this issue and finding some ways in which progress can be achieved. So yeah, it's asking how culture plays a role, I would say, in every possible way.
Thank you, Catherine. Leah.
Yeah, thank you, Nikki. I just wanted to come in quickly with an interesting fact that sometimes the institutions that we've surveyed are more gender equal than the society they're embedded in. I'm thinking specifically of the case of the Science Council of Japan. It's the first case study featured in the report. I highly recommend you go check it out because it's very interesting. We've talked with the vice president of the institution, and they reminded us that Japan often rank among the lowest G20 country in matter of gender equality in the society, and yet the Science Council of Japan is the third academy worldwide in the proportion of women members. They have 38% women members, so they really took the issue really closely to heart and really enforced a number of really interesting policies and initiatives to fix the issue, and they are now more gender equal than their society. So like we said, culture is very important, but I think what matters most is really institutional change and institutional drive. Thank you for the question. Very interesting.
Yes, thank you. I'd just like to add also, as someone who started their career in the 70s, I have seen how culture can change over time and how the UK has moved from a deeply sexist culture to something that is much more open, and that gradually gets reflected. But it only happens by people picking up on it and working hard on it. So, okay, let's move to the next question. Which is, to what extent can academies and unions be compared with respect to membership? We've talked a lot about the different findings from the two. Is it possible to compare them? Peter, would you like to say anything, or?
Okay.
Yes.
Maybe I'll answer a different question. I'll contrast
Okay.
the membership, if you like. I mentioned a few minutes ago that membership to academies is by election. So there is usually a nomination procedure by the members who are already within the academy. They scout around and find people to nominate, and those nominations are reviewed, and the cream rise to the top. So it really is, let's say, an internal process and a very strong selection. And of course, the report goes into some of the processes and barriers that selection process entails when it comes to nominating women and getting them into the academies in the first place. Whereas I won't speak so much for the unions, but it's mainly if you are qualified, you can apply to be a member of a particular union, whether you're a psychologist, a physicist, or an applied chemist, or whatever, you want to be part of that society of like-minded people in the same field that organize the congresses and so on in your particular field, and so you have access to that, and it's pretty much putting yourself forward rather than waiting to be put forward by somebody else.
Thank you. I think that's very relevant. Marie-Françoise, did you want to say something on this?
Well, just to add to what Peter just said, I mean, the unions, in fact, when you are a mathematician and you want to get involved, you become part of the, say, in my case, French Mathematical Society, or National Society. And then maybe you take responsibility there. And then at some point you become more visible internationally because also of what you do, of your papers, your cooperation. And then you get involved in this more international organization. So the organization is electing people based on nominating committees and also at the General Assembly, which is representing basically same number of members per each country. So in a way, it's more the idea to reflect the diversity of the community rather than, say, identifying very elite members.
Thank you. Okay, I have a question from Bruna, who is a maths education student in Brazil, who asks, what would you say to young people who aspire to pursue an academic career? Do any members of the panel want to respond to this one? Or if not, I would echo Marie-Françoise's statements, which is get involved. And if you see opportunities to contribute, to contribute to a committee, to contribute to your national organization, get involved and remember that there is more, as it were, to a career than just your own individual work, that you also are participating in a community and, helping that community to develop is part of becoming a responsible member of it, I suppose. Okay. Anybody want to add to that, or should we move on? The question here is, why are there less women in maths and computer sciences than there are in the humanities? And how do you explain the decline in computer science from 2020 to 2025? Or at least the decline we saw in the original stats. Anybody got any ideas on that one? Marie-Françoise.
Well, so of course, I'm not personally from computer scientists, but it's well-known process that initially, and you can see it if you have seen the films Hidden Figures, that initially many computer scientists were women and they played a key role, and after a while it became a very maybe a topic where there was more money or more power involved, and in this case, unfortunately, the women's influence has been declining. So it's really a kind of topic where you see that the proportion of women has been decreasing, while in other cases it's not. So we have as a member of SCGS, there is this Association for Computing Machinery, which is making also a lot of efforts to improve the situation of women. I want also to say that, for example, in mathematics, I don't know if it's so true in engineering sciences, but in mathematics, it really depends a lot of the country. Like in Europe, for example, you have many women in Italy or Spain or Portugal who are mathematicians, and in more northern countries in Europe, there are much less women. So again, it's saying that the culture is important and not only the topic. So I think basically it's interesting to observe the differences over time, over countries, just to see that there is nothing natural. It's just something that we are doing, and we can modify it also if we work.
Thank you. Thank you. Leah.
Thank you, Nikki. Just quickly, because indeed, as part of the project team, we were puzzled about this computer science decreasing, and the solution would be to gather more data and over a longer time. But I quite like Marie-François' theory that when a field becomes more prestigious, women tends to get erased from it, and the opposite is actually true. When a field has more women, the prestige tends to go down. And that's what people involved in health science, life science, animal science will tell you. Health profession are, well, like more and more women. Actually, you have more women in Academy of Medicine than you do in Academy of Science in most countries. And when you have this womanization of a field, let's say, then the prestige associated with it tends to decline. Another interesting trend to study, maybe.
Thank you. I think also there's a question of visibility too. I mean, very often we hear it. Well, we've heard this also from our contributors, that there are no women, but actually there are lots of women. They are just not visible as much, and that can be. Sometimes it's actual reticence to put themselves forward. I mean, I think it's very easy for women to suffer from imposter syndrome, you know, to feel maybe that they're not able to be as assertive as men and so on. And but there's also a question of the importance of recognizing that this work is there and that they are contributing to it, and it's a valuable thing. So I think I'm never sure when I hear these statistics about there not being enough women. I think probably there are enough women, but they're doing other stuff. You know, they're doing other things. I mean, there's another issue too, which is that I've known many women who have not been involved in higher levels of their organization because they felt they had enough on with their childcare responsibilities and all the other things, and they didn't feel able to take on more responsibilities. So that's another. There are issues around that, but I do automatically kind of distrust the statistics that just say, "Oh, there aren't enough women involved." Because I think when you look more closely, they probably are. But as Leah says, the higher status professions tend to emphasize the male contributors more. Anyway, Leah, I've lost my timer stopped when that phone call came. I don't know how long we have left.
Actually, we're a bit over time already.
Okay.
And there are so many more questions. Unfortunately, we won't be able to answer all of them.
No.
Maybe we can do one more and then conclude, so
one
that
more,
we can
possibly two.
we can end that in 5 minutes.
Okay.
We don't want to keep
the
people over
question
time.
of what does science lose in terms of innovation and solution by continuing to underrepresent women? I think that's important. Let's spell out, how does science miss out on this? Anybody? Renuka, please.
I have a nice example from ornithology where a few decades ago, there were many more male ornithologists than female. And songs in birds was known to be a particularly male bird trait. Actually, it's not that. And when more and more females came into the study of ornithology, they found that it's not just the male birds that have bird song. It's actually like all the different birds, regardless of either male or female. So you can get so many different perspectives by including everyone in the studies that you lose out if you don't have that diversity in the sciences. And that's something that's so important to kind of underline. This is why we need diversity of perspectives in sciences.
Thank you. Yes, that's a very good lesson, and I think it applies in a lot of areas. Peter?
Yeah, well, just picking up on that point, I mean, we as the IAP or academies themselves, we like to think we are the voice of science. We are non-biased, credible bodies. But if we are only represented by a majority of men and a minority of women, then that voice is skewed. I forget who it was. Was it Lilia that also mentioned other ethnicities coming through in the next, what happens next, sort of, so organizations, whichever organization it is, giving scientific advice needs to ensure that all these voices are being fed into the process to distill the best advice.
Thank you. I think, Leah, are we right? That's all we have time for. And I'm very sorry about that because there are some very good questions in the Q&A that we haven't had time to address. So over to you, Leah.
Thank you so much, Nikki. Unfortunately, it's often the time. Just to mention them quickly, there were a lot of questions about how can we build institutional momentum, discussed from the Lisbon Academy of Science. There was a question about how can we convince people who are not convinced. And one that linked to that was, is it a double burden for women to be underrepresented, but also having to advocate and push for gender equality in extra activity, like being part of committees, and I think we can absolutely agree it's a double burden, especially on the top of the fact that they assume more of the care responsibility, as we've seen in the data. So there were so many good questions. Some question can be answered directly if you read the report. So again, I would invite you to do so. There is a quite a succinct executive summary at the start. If you do not want to go through the 70 pages, which can be understandable, but it's quite a light read. We made sure it was very clear and digestible. So thank you so much, everyone, for asking your question today. We're just going to conclude now. And to do so, I'm going to invite Carol Woodward. Carol, who is the current chair of the Standing Committee for Gender Equality, to come in and in 1 minute give us the concluding thoughts from the SCGS, which is a partner from the project. Please go ahead, Carol.
Right. No, thank you. I want to thank everybody for your interest in this topic and taking the time to attend this webinar today. I want to thank the scientific unions and their members who participated in the union and individual surveys, as well as those who stood for interviews that gave rise to the findings in this report. Without the considerable time and effort that our scientific community took to give thoughtful responses to all of these venues, this work could never have been done. And it was with your time and effort that we're able to, in some sense, take this snapshot in time of where we are. But now that we have this excellent report reflecting the current situation of gender equality across the globe, I encourage all scientific unions to consider the recommendations made and whether they are in a position to implement them within their unions. As part of SCGS regular activities, our committee members exchange best practices among partner unions, and we are encouraged to see this work has had an impact. And we encourage other international science unions to join us as we continue this work and help each other in implementing the recommendations in this report. So thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Indeed, there were questions about people. How can we help you? How can we take part in this work? If you're a union, I would, as Carol did, invite you to get closer, to contact the SCGS. They will be the best people placed to let you know how you can come on board. Peter, please, for your conclusion as on behalf of the InterAcademy Partnership.
Okay, well, just as Carol has done for the scientific unions, I'd like to thank all the academies that took the time to respond to the survey, not only this year, but also 5 years and 10 years ago. The continued engagement that they've shown has made something very important possible. We now have the baseline data that allow us to track real progress over time. And as we've seen today, the progress is steady and real, even if our discussions remind us that there is still much more to do. The report we're releasing today is not just a snapshot of where we stand, it is also a practical guide for what comes next. It offers clear recommendations and concrete tools, including best practice case studies that academies and other scientific organizations can use and adapt to their own situations. So therefore, I encourage you to read the report carefully, discuss it within your councils, your executive committees, and ask yourselves what meaningful steps you can take within your own institution Let's remember that behind every data point are careers, ambitions, and talents that really deserve equal opportunity. And therefore, most importantly, I'd like to leave you with a challenge. When the next survey goes live, likely around 2030, let's be ready not only to contribute data again, but to show even stronger and more visible progress in gender equality across our organizations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter and Carol. And just to conclude myself from the International Science Council, I'm just going to jump on what Carol and Peter just said and what the project task force has been saying since the beginning. We do not want this report to be yet another report on a shelf. We really want it to be a first action point to get the conversation going, to get interested organization to contact us, to share feedback, and to find a way, like the SCGS dot with Union, to get organization talking and sharing experience and best practices. Some regional network already do that on the academy side. It would be great to expand on that because one of the regular comment we get when we present this work from head of organization is how can we partake. So please do get in touch with the three partners. We would be really happy to continue pursuing this work and to help this collaboration further. So that would be my concluding word. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us today. Several of you asked for the slides, the recording, everything will be shared to you directly by email in the coming days. I want to share our panelists, our speakers today. We took the time, we went slightly over time, but the discussion was so stimulating. So I think it was worth it. And as everyone said, thank you also very much to all organizations and all individual scientists who took the time and bear with us taking our survey through 2025. It was a lot of effort. So thank you everyone. And have a great rest of the day on this International Day for Women and Girls in Science. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.